The deadliest machine in the history of American construction never crushed anyone. It did not fall, it did not explode, and it did not fail. It worked exactly the way the engineers intended. Men walked into it healthy every morning and walked out feeling fine. And then, hours later, far from the job site, their own blood began to kill them. By the time anyone understood why, it had crippled the man who built the Brooklyn Bridge, and it would go on killing men beneath the rivers of New York for the next 40 years. We will get to that machine. But it sits at the very end of this list, and to understand why it earned the top spot, we have to start lower down. Because this was the pattern we kept finding. The machines that built the modern world, the drills and the boilers and the derricks, and the great swinging buckets of wet concrete, were not gentle. They killed the men who operated them by the thousands, and most of those men were never named, never counted, and never paid. We spent weeks on this. These are the 10 deadliest machines in construction history, counted down from number 10 to number 1. In another video, we counted down the 10 deadliest construction disasters, the single days when everything went wrong at once. This is different. This time we are not counting the disasters. We are counting the machines that did the killing, slowly and quietly, across whole careers. And the closer we get to number 1, the higher the body count climbs. Number 10, the crawler tractor. Before the bulldozer had hydraulics, it had a cable and a prayer. The machine that would become the Caterpillar tractor grew out of the Holt and Best companies, two California rivals who merged into Caterpillar in 1925. The blade on the front was not raised by oil and pistons. It was raised by a steel cable running over a frame, and on the earliest machines, the operator had to climb down and set that blade by hand. The bulldozer started life as nothing more than an attachment, patented in 1925 under the plain name attachment for tractors. These machines drained swamps, cut roads through mountains, and leveled the ground for dams and airfields. They were the muscle of American construction for half a century, and they had one habit that killed the men who loved them most. They rolled. A crawler tractor working across a slope is a heavy machine sitting on a knife edge. Let one track slip. Let one bench of soft earth give way beneath the downhill side, and several tons of steel turn over. For decades, the operator sat in the open with no cage above his head, and often no belt across his lap. When the machine rolled, it rolled onto him. There was nowhere to go. The fix seems obvious now. It was a steel bar over the operator's head, and a belt to hold him in the seat. We know exactly how well it works, because the numbers are brutal. A rollover protection structure and a seatbelt together are estimated to be about 99% effective at preventing death when a machine turns over. In one study of 100 overturns, every single fatality happened on a machine with no roll bar. By the early 1970s, one major manufacturer said it knew of no death in a rolled-over tractor that had a proper guard. And yet the steel cage did not become standard on American tractors until 1986. That is more than 60 years of operators dying under machines that a simple steel bar could have saved. Number 9, the cofferdam. To build a bridge pier or the foundation of a dam, you first have to fight the river itself. The cofferdam is how it is done. Workers drive interlocking steel sheets into the riverbed in a ring, brace the walls with heavy timbers and steel, and then run powerful pumps day and night to empty the water out. What is left is a strange and unnatural place. A dry hole in the middle of a living river, with men working at the bottom, and millions of gallons of water held back by a wall and a pump. The idea is ancient. The Romans used timber cofferdams to build the piers of a bridge across the Danube nearly 2,000 years ago. But the principle has never gotten any safer, because the failure is always the same. If the wall gives way, or the floor blows out from the pressure underneath, the river comes back all at once, and it does not come back alone. It brings the crane, the engine, and the boiler down into the hole on top of the men. On a March morning in 1909, at a dockworks in Birkenhead, England, just after high tide, the foundation of a cofferdam gave way without a sound of warning. 14 of the 15 men working at the bottom were killed as the water, the wreckage, and a collapsing crane platform trapped them below the surface. 7 women were widowed in an instant. 13 children lost their fathers. It took divers a month to bring all the bodies back up. This is not just a story from another century and another country. In the year 2000, on the Brightman Street Bridge over the Taunton River in Massachusetts, a cofferdam collapsed during construction. Investigators found the contractor had changed the design of 5 different cofferdams away from what the engineers had drawn. The official report noted something chilling. If the crew had not happened to be on a coffee break when it let go, the entire crew could have been crushed or drowned. They were saved by the timing of a coffee break and nothing else. If you are learning something here that you have not seen in the dozens of other videos on this subject, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It costs nothing, and it tells us to keep digging into stories that nobody else is telling. Number 8. The guy, derrick. Before the tower crane, there was the derrick, and every great American skyscraper before the 1960s was raised by one. A guy derrick is a tall mast and a swinging boom, held upright by a fan of steel cables called guys anchored to the building. The clever part is that it could climb. Once the steel of one floor was set, the derrick would haul itself up to the next level and start again, walking its way to the top of the building like a spider climbing its own web. Some of these machines could lift well over 200 tons. The danger lived in those cables and that boom. Snap a single guy wire, break the boom, or pull an anchor loose, and the whole arm comes crashing down with whatever it was carrying. The men below are crushed or struck. The men above leap for their lives. The very name carries the history in it. A derrick is named for Thomas Derrick, an Elizabethan hangman, and because the machine looked so much like his gallows. And the machine earned that name many times over. A guy derrick had no fail-safe. There was no second cable waiting to catch a load if the first one let go, and no brake that could stop several tons of granite once it began to fall. The whole machine balanced on the tension in those guy wires, and every time a crew jumped the derrick up to the next floor, there was a long moment when it was barely held at all. One frayed strand of cable, one anchor working loose in fresh concrete, and the boom came down on whatever stood below. During the building of the granite towers of the Brooklyn Bridge in 1871, a pair of derricks hauling stone gave way. A wooden boom sheared the top clean off the head of a rigger named John French. A man named Doherty was crushed beneath a falling mast. Another worker, John McGarrity, died leaping to escape it. A stonemason named Thomas Douglas died later of his injuries. These were among the first men to die building the most famous bridge in America, and the derrick killed them before the towers were even finished. For the next 80 years, on every rising steel skeleton in New York and Chicago, the same machine did the same thing, a few men at a time, until the tower crane finally pushed it aside. And the derrick has not vanished entirely. At the Rock of Ages Granite Quarry in Vermont, stiff-leg derricks still swing 30-ton blocks of stone today, a working reminder of the machine that raised, and sometimes killed, an entire generation of high steel men. Number 7. The concrete cableway and the bucket. On the great dams of the last century, concrete did not arrive in a truck. It flew. Steel buckets holding several tons of wet concrete were slung from cables strung high across the canyon, or from giant cranes, swung out over the rising face of the dam, and dumped. If you saw our video on the Deadliest machine at Hoover Dam, you already know what a cableway could do. But Hoover was not the only dam in the sky, and the bucket itself was its own kind of killer. A bucket carrying 4 tons of concrete, swinging on a cable strung high across the canyon, is a wrecking ball that nobody aimed. These cableways ran from tower to tower above the work, and the buckets that hung from them were big enough to swallow a man whole. At the Grand Coulee Dam in the 1930s, the records tell the story in a steady drumbeat of single names. A 21-year-old laborer named James Rayburn was killed when a swinging concrete bucket fractured his skull. A 4-yard bucket dropped some 20 feet off its crane and came down on the men below. A 32-year-old signalman named Gerald Coble was struck down by a heavy steel bucket. A worker named Arthur French, 39 years old, was crushed by a concrete block he was stripping. The official count of the dead on the original dam is 77, but the people who have actually gone back through the record did put the true number higher, somewhere past 80 across the whole life of the project. And almost none of them were engineers or foremen. They were the laborers, knocked off the wall or crushed by the equipment that built it. For decades, no one even had their full names, until a local researcher and a visitor center worker sat down and rebuilt the list one man at a time, because the people who ran the dam had never bothered to keep it. And here is the part that should make you angry. When the dam was finished, a granite memorial was carved with the names of the men who died building it. In 1940, that memorial was stolen in the dark of night, reportedly by the very sculptor who made it, and its bronze plaque was lost. The men were killed by the machine, and then their names were carried off into the night. One thing that is not true is the old story that their bodies are buried inside the concrete of the dam. That is a myth. The truth is plainer and somehow worse. They were crushed in the open, in front of everyone, and then quietly forgotten. That brings us to number 6. And the next machine did not kill with steel or with concrete. It killed by the sheer weight of how many men it swallowed. Number 6. The Hand and Mule Dam. Before the Diesel Age, New York City built its water supply by muscle. The New Croton Dam, raised between 1892 and 1906, and the Ashokan Reservoir that followed it in the Catskills, were built with a system, not a single machine. Hand drills and steam drills, black powder and dynamite, mules dragging carts, and narrow-gauge railroad cars hauling stone. Steam derricks and cableways lifting 2-ton blocks of cut granite. The New Croton Dam alone used around 11 locomotives, more than 280 rail cars, dozens of derricks, and a rock quarry 17 miles away. When it was finished, it was the tallest dam in the world, and it still stands as the largest cut stone masonry dam in the United States. It was, in every sense, a handmade mountain. And we have to be honest with you about something. Nobody knows how many men died building it. The company never kept an honest count. What survives instead is a saying, passed down among the Italian stonemasons who did the work. They said that a man lost his life for every stone set on the dam. That is not a statistic. It is folklore, and we will not pretend it is a body count. But the historians who have studied New York's water system say plainly that hundreds of workers died across these projects, and countless more were maimed. On the Catskill Aqueduct. One local paper recorded more than 3,800 accidents to the workers, and noted that because the laborers were so invisible, the death of one of them attracted no public attention at all. Listen to the lives behind that sentence. The men were recruited out of southern Italy through bosses called padrones, handed $25 to wave at the immigration officer, then made to hand it right back a block later. They were housed in shacks on stilts and paid the lowest wage on the job, about $1.25 for a 10-hour day. One worker, married over the weekend, was killed on the Monday in a rock crusher. In 1900, the quarrymen finally put down their tools and threatened to blow the dam apart over starvation wages, and the contractors did not answer with a raise. They asked the governor of New York, a man named Theodore Roosevelt, for troops. 1,500 National Guardsmen marched in and occupied the site. They called it Camp Roosevelt. The strike collapsed in about 3 weeks, and the men went back to dying for $1.25 a day. And the dam did not only consume the men who built it. To fill the reservoirs behind these walls, whole towns were drowned. The New Croton project alone condemned 4 villages and more than 400 farms, and around 1,500 bodies had to be dug out of their graves and moved before the water rose. When the Catskill project flooded the valley for the Ashokan Reservoir, about 2,000 living people were forced from their homes, and the remains in some 32 cemeteries were disinterred and reburied, with families offered $15 for each body. The living workers were housed in segregated camps, the Italian stonecutters in one place, and the black laborers who drove the mules in another. By 1913, the men on the Catskill Aqueduct had finally pushed their pay up to $2 a day. To put the size of this in perspective, the Flatiron Building in Manhattan could have been dropped whole into the foundation hole of the New Croton Dam and not reached the top. It was the last of the great handmade dams, a cut-stone mountain raised by mules and muscle and black powder at the very moment the diesel engine was about to make every bit of it obsolete. And the men who paid for it with their lives were never properly counted. That is the halfway point of our countdown. The 5 machines still ahead of us were the deadliest of them all. Every one of these documentaries takes us days of reading, cross-checking, and arguing over a single number before we trust it. So if you want to help us keep doing this work, there is a link in the description to support the channel. It genuinely keeps these videos coming. Now, on to the second half, because the machines only get more dangerous from here. Number 5. The Riveting Gang. For every skyscraper and steel bridge built in the first half of the 20th century, the steel was held together by red-hot rivets and a 4-man crew working on open beams in the open air. One man, the heater, cooked the rivets cherry red in a small coal forge and threw them. A second man caught the glowing rivet in a metal can while balanced on a narrow plank. A third braced it from behind, and the fourth drove it home with a pneumatic hammer that shook his whole body. There were no nets below them. There were no harnesses on them. There was just the beam, the gun, and the long drop. We do not have a clean count of how many of them fell across the decades, so let us rank this machine the honest way, by the rate. Even today, ironworkers are killed by falls at a rate of nearly 39 for every 100,000 workers, which is about 10 times higher than the average across all of construction. Now imagine that work with no harness and no net, a glowing rivet sailing through the air, and a pneumatic gun hammering in your hands. These were the same kind of riveting gangs we showed you building the Empire State Building. Many of the best of them were Mohawk ironworkers from the communities of Kanawake and Akwesasne, who entered the trade in 1886 and went on to rivet the Chrysler Building, the Empire State Building, and Rockefeller Center. There is a romantic myth that the Mohawks felt no fear of heights, that they were somehow born without it. It is not true, and it is worth saying clearly, because the myth hides the cost. The Mohawks did not die in smaller numbers than other ironworkers. They were not fearless. They were skilled, and they were brave, and they fell just like everyone else. Above one of the bars, where the Brooklyn ironworkers drank, a sign declared that the greatest ironworkers in the world passed through those doors, and the men believed it. The four-man gang would rotate their jobs through the day, so that no single man had to hold that screaming gun for too long at a stretch. But the gun, the forge, the flying rivet, and the open beam never got any safer. Even now, with harnesses and nets and modern rules, ironworkers in America still die at a rate of dozens every year, and around 3/4 of them die the same way they always have. They fall. Number 4. The drill and blast tunnel jumbo. To dig a tunnel through solid rock, you bring in a jumbo, a wheeled carriage bristling with rock drills that bore a pattern of holes into the stone face. The holes are packed with dynamite. The crew pulls back, the face is blasted, the broken rock is hauled out, and the tunnel creeps forward, maybe 11 feet at a time. Then the men walk back into the smoke and do it again. This is the machine that has dug New York City's deepest secret, Water Tunnel Number 3, a project begun in 1970 that is still not finished after more than half a century. The danger underground never really changes. A blast that goes off early, a misfire that waits, loose rock falling from a roof that was not scaled, a fall down a shaft, water flooding a heading, and the slow poison of rock dust in the lungs. Building Water Tunnel Number 3 has killed 24 people, including 23 workers and a 12-year-old boy named Don Ree Carroll, who fell into a shaft that had been left uncapped. The men who do this work are called sandhogs, and their union traces its roots straight back to the caissons of the Brooklyn Bridge in 1872. One retired sandhog who spent decades in that tunnel put it simply: Brooklyn has some of the hardest rock you can ever imagine. In the shafts, you always have the danger of something falling from the top. Some of these tunnels run 800 feet beneath the street, deeper underground than the tallest buildings stand above it. And when each worker dies, the others remember him in a way that fits the trade. There is a memorial in the Bronx for the men lost on the water tunnels, and set into it is a manhole cover engraved for every one of them. The work is finally getting safer, and for a grim reason. The dynamite and the drill jumbo are giving way to the boring machine, a giant turning head the sandhogs call the mole, which grinds through the rock without a blast. There has not been a death in that tunnel since 1997, but it took more than a century and 24 lives to reach that point. If this is showing you a side of construction history you have never seen, hit like and subscribe so we can keep these coming. We are now into the final 3, and from here, the numbers stop being about single accidents and start becoming about whole generations of men. Number 3. The steam boiler. This is the machine that powered everything else on this list. The steam boiler ran the locomotives, the derricks, the cableways, the pumps, and the pile drivers. It was a sealed steel vessel where a coal fire boiled water into high-pressure steam. By the early 1900s, that steam was held at pressures that would tear a man apart, with the water inside sitting far hotter than boiling, but kept liquid by the pressure alone. As long as the water covered the steel, the machine was safe. The trouble began the moment it did not. Here is what happens. If the water drops too low, the top sheet of the firebox is no longer cooled, and the fire drives that steel red hot until it loses its strength. The bolts holding it soften and let go, and the sheet tears open. The instant it does, the pressure drops, and all that superheated water flashes into steam at once, expanding to more than 1,000 times its volume in a fraction of a second. The result is not a leak. It is a bomb. The boiler can be thrown like a rocket, and a jet of live steam scalds anyone nearby. And it gets worse, because a boiler can do this even when its safety valve is working perfectly, since the failure is in the overheated steel, not the pressure. The scale of this was staggering, and almost completely forgotten today. In the year 1880 alone, there were 159 boiler explosions in the United States. In the following decade, more than 2,000 boilers blew apart. On a March morning in 1912, a locomotive sitting in a railroad yard in San Antonio, Texas, blew up while being fired for a test run. A single piece of steel weighing 16,000 pounds was hurled 1,200 feet through the air, and the blast shook a city of 100,000 people. The veteran engineer who had personally re-inspected that locomotive, because he did not trust the repair work done during a strike, was killed in the blast. 7 years earlier, a worn-out backup boiler in a shoe factory in Brockton, Massachusetts, let go through a hidden crack in a seam, rocketed up through 4 floors and the roof, and brought the whole building down in fire. 58 people died. The carnage is the reason we have safety codes at all. Out of these decades of explosions came the first company in America devoted to industrial safety, founded to inspect boilers, and then the first state boiler laws, and finally the great engineering code that governs pressure vessels to this day, written in 1915. And if you think this is ancient history, consider this. In the year 2001, at a county fair in Ohio, a restored steam traction engine exploded in front of the crowd because its firebox sheet had quietly rusted down to less than 1/10 of an inch thick when the design called for more than 1/3. It released the energy of a bomb. 5 people were killed and 47 were hurt. The machine waited almost 100 years, and then it did exactly what these machines have always done. Number 2. Nitroglycerin and the rock drill at the Hoosac Tunnel. In 1851, crews set out to bore a railroad tunnel nearly 5 miles through a mountain in Massachusetts, and to do it, they reached for 2 machines that had barely existed before. The first was a compressed air rock drill, the first one to truly work in America, which let men cut into the stone faster than any hand crew ever could. The second was far more dangerous. On the site, a chemist manufactured his own nitroglycerin, more than 500,000 pounds of it over the years, and set it off with electricity. Together, these 2 machines opened the mountain. They also turned the tunnel into a slaughterhouse. The men who worked it gave it a name that stuck for over a century. They called it the Bloody Pit. Across the 24 years it took to dig, accidents at the Hoosac Tunnel killed or seriously injured 195 workers, with at least 135 deaths confirmed. The worst single moment came on a night in October of 1867. A candle ignited fumes in the building atop the central shaft. The structure collapsed, and burning debris and machinery rained down onto 13 men, working nearly 600 feet below. The pumps were destroyed, and the shaft began to flood. And this is the part we could not stop thinking about. When rescuers finally reached the bottom of that flooded shaft, almost a year later, they understood that the men had not died in the fire or the fall. They had survived it. Down in the dark, with the water rising around them, those men had built a small raft out of the wreckage and floated on it, waiting for a rescue that was coming far too slowly. They lived for hours, maybe longer, in the blackness at the bottom of the mountain. The drill and the explosive made the tunnel possible. They also made it one of the most haunting stories in the history of American construction, and we believe it deserves to be remembered properly. Which brings us to number 1. The deadliest machine in the history of American construction. The one we told you about at the very beginning, the machine that killed without ever laying a hand on anyone. The pneumatic caisson. To build a bridge pier or a tunnel on the bed of a river, engineers sank a giant upside-down box or pushed an iron shield through the muck and pumped it full of compressed air to hold back the water so men could dig at the bottom. The machine worked beautifully. The men did not. Under that pressure, gas dissolved into their blood without their knowing it, and when they came back up to the surface too quickly, it boiled out of them in bubbles. It twisted their joints, it dropped them paralyzed, and it killed them, sometimes hours later, in their own beds. They walked out of the chamber bent over in pain, and that is how the disease got the name we still use, the bends. The toll runs through the most famous structures in the country. On the Eads Bridge in St. Louis, of the 600 men who worked in the caissons, more than 100 were stricken, and at least 14 died, while the project doctor ran a floating hospital beside the pier and slowly, painfully, began to understand what was happening. On the Brooklyn Bridge, around 20 men died of the same disease. The first was a German laborer named John Myers, dead 2 days after his shift. The man who built that bridge, Washington Roebling, was himself crippled by the bends and spent years directing the work from his window through a telescope, while his wife Emily carried his orders down to the site. And in 1880, on a tunnel being pushed beneath the Hudson River, a blowout jammed the airlock and the river poured in. An assistant superintendent named Peter Woodland sealed 8 of his men through to safety, and then stayed behind in the flooding chamber to die. The numbers only got more terrible as the tunnels got longer. On the great railroad tunnels under the East River, there were more than 8,000 recorded cases of the bends. One historian, looking at the Hudson River Tunnel, wrote that it was believed 1 man had died for every single foot of its length. Think about that the next time you ride a train under a river. The relief, when it finally came from one contractor's agent who found a quarter of his workforce dying and built the first medical recompression chamber on the site, an ancestor of every decompression chamber used today. New York passed the first laws to protect these men in 1909, decades too late for most of them. The machine had worked perfectly the entire time. It built the bridges and the tunnels we still use. It just quietly took the men who built them. So there it is. 10 machines, counted down from the crawler tractor to the caisson, and a single thread running through all of them. Every safety code, every steel cage, every harness, every recompression chamber, and every inspection law was written in the blood of the men who went first. The machines did not hate them. The machines simply did what machines do, and the rules to protect the operators always arrived a little too late. Look back across the whole list, and the pattern is impossible to miss. The boiler that powered the work, the cable that swung the load, the chamber that held back the river. None of them were villains. They were machines doing exactly what they were built to do, in an age when the men who ran them were treated as the cheapest part of the entire job. These are the stories we started this channel to tell, the ones hiding behind the famous bridges and the towering dams, in the names that never made it onto the memorial. If you believe these men deserve to be remembered with the specifics and the respect they earned, then like this video and subscribe to Construction Legends. We are going to keep digging.